The Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Listen responsibly. Welcome back to the Cyber Minutes podcast. I'm Max, and I'm joined by Flynn. And today we're going to jump right into it and talk about what frustrates you in cyber. So Flynn, what frustrates you working in cyber?
So I think it's a bit corny. I think one of the main frustrating things in cyber, it's also a good thing, but when you start out, it's really hard to grasp a concept of a lot of things. It feels like you're always constantly learning, which is good, but you start really making strides in a certain area and then you realize, oh shit, I really don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
But that's great because learning forever is a great thing, just expanding your knowledge, and then that increases the value for yourself as an individual as well. But I could see why that can be frustrating for a lot of people.
It's not the same as, coding, where if you're a genius at coding, you know how to solve 99% of problems. In cyber, it's adapting, and there's always so much more to learn.
Exactly. And there's always, with cyber, you can always go down a chain of, oh, well, this is secure, but what if this happens? I think another frustrating thing about cyber, thankfully, I don't have to deal with it as much working at a consultancy firm. And luckily, I haven't witnessed it too much with clients either, but politics in cyber can be a major issue. Especially, you hear a lot of stories that, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, like at the end of the day, it's a business, but you get a lot of like CFOs that will try and cut costs because that may be beneficial. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the trade-off you have to take with security. How much are you willing to spend? How much resources are you willing to put in? But obviously, as a security person, that can be very frustrating at times when you don't have those resources available.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that frustrates me is not being able to, like Flynn said, fully understand everything at once. Although I think on the flip side, just like any position that you get and you're fresh into it, your opinion's not really going to matter as much as someone who's more senior than you straight away. So what this means is that you have to put in some techniques of persuasion and try to influence people around you a little bit, not in a negative, manipulative way, but you have to really be smart with how you're communicating to everyone. Otherwise, you might feel like your voice isn't heard as much. So I think that is probably like something that I find that could be potentially sort of frustrating. Failing certifications, if you've experienced that can be frustrating, having to restart.
Yeah, it comes back to the same thing where cyber's not easy a lot of the time. It can be difficult, and, going for those big tests can be nerve-wracking, and nobody likes failing a test. So
Yeah, it's not easy. That's what you've hit it on the head is cyber. While some people might say it's a good career to get into because the barrier of entry is so low, which really it isn't that as low as what you might think it is, but it's low-ish. It's quite difficult. It's not the easiest kind of industry to be in either.
It can be quite stressful for a lot of people as well for the same reasons of under-resourcing and feeling like they can't get ahead. They're always one step behind.
What's the biggest difference that we found from our studies compared to the industry? So this is a really good question. I might have a crack at answering it first. The main difference for me is that a lot of things that you're taught in uni about cybersecurity and what the perfect controls are going to look like turn out to be just complete bullshit. Someone's just made it up in a curriculum and said, oh yeah, this was probably relevant when I was working in the industry, if they ever were, and they'll just put it on the course and say, this is what the best practice should be, when really they have no idea. They haven't been in the industry for maybe a long time. And I find that a big difference is that, some of the content you learn isn't going to cross over exactly onto, you're not going to do a course in uni and then in your internship, you're not going to apply the exact same things that you learned in your course at your job. I think as well, there's a bit of pressure on converting what you'd learn in uni and what you're actually doing. And I think it's a good type of pressure where the mindset that you get, where you're problem solving and you're trying to combat certain issues using technical knowledge, maybe it's a combination of technical and non-technical knowledge to complete assignments, that kind of problem solving in uni, that absolutely crosses over. So you're going to be doing a lot of transformative kind of thinking, if that's the right word, where you're trying to tackle an issue from certain different angles and having that mindset to try and combat problems. Yeah, that's something you get from uni that crosses over.
Yeah, I think you've said that perfectly. Like in the past, we've said how valuable uni was for networking, but I think you hit the nail on the head that it teaches you a lot, but it also teaches you how to learn. Another aspect I felt in uni, because it's a cybersecurity thing, it's just very computing focused, but it misses out on a lot of the business aspect of cyber. I found that a lot of the time it was very idealistic, and it wasn't talking about how certain controls are too expensive, certain controls aren't realistic. As you said, certain controls are outdated. Luckily, we had one unit where the guy was more realistic, but yeah, it felt like a lot of them just, you could blatantly tell they hadn't been in the industry for a while, and I'm sure some of them had never been in the industry, which, to be honest, I think is a bit of a problem. I think you absolutely have to be in the cyber industry because it's completely different to academics. And, academics is extremely valuable, and especially in computing. Like, I can't do any of the academic side of it. But yeah, it's such a different world. It's so business focused. Cybersecurity is such a business,
definitely
business problem. It's an organization wide problem, and figuring out how to manage that is something, at least from our course. And I think our course was one of the best at Macquarie University, but even that missed out on some aspects of that.
Yeah, 100%. Something, if we're going to talk about specifics a little bit, something that's unrealistic is, I feel like the hands-on kind of dirty work that they get you to do in some units. I'll think of an example. So we did this unit where you're analyzing code for certain vulnerabilities in the code or certain issues, and you're changing bits around in the code and trying to reduce the amount of errors and not only errors, but vulnerabilities in the code itself. Whereas in the industry, you may not even be a part of that team, to be honest, but even if you are working in that team, most of that will actually be done for you. So tools like Sneak and like static code analysis and also dynamic code analysis tools, all of that is going to be done for you in the back end by a smart tool.
Yeah.
And you're not really going to need to know how to manually go in and change the code.
Yeah, I think that's something university realistically has to teach us, that because cyber is such a broad thing. Like, realistically, how many people are going to apply the quantum computing cryptography knowledge that we learn in that unit?
Yeah, no.
But that being said, you still have to learn it because it's a valuable part of cybersecurity, and someone may go down that path.
Yeah.
But yeah, can't say I'm ever going to be doing proof theory, and I'm very glad I'm not going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing with every unit, though, is that they have to teach you that stuff, because even if you're not going to use it, it's valuable knowledge.
Something that I'll bring up that was missed in uni that I found has been relevant or has been important to understand is pen testing under the premise of the OWASP Top 10. Now, OWASP Top 10 was taught in uni for us, but actually pen testing and finding the top 10 kind of issues and going through, that wasn't really part of our pen testing unit, I don't think.
Unfortunately, I think our pen testing unit, although it was valuable and it was very fun, it kind of followed a similar structure to something like Hack the Box, where you're finding these flags which are valuable, and, they're going to be issues there that you may use in pen testing, but sometimes it's just not realistic.
Yeah, and it's not really directed either.
Yeah.
So a more realistic view of pen testing would be going through, having a system that you're able to look through and checking for the OWASP Top 10 in order, and going through and seeing if you can find if there's broken access controls, or trying to find those passwords that are stored in plain text, or if there's any kind of other injections or issues like that, like maybe a website or something like that. That's something that we see a lot in our pen tests using the OWASP Top 10, but we didn't actually fully learn that in uni. That's something that the pen testers have to pick up as they go.
One thing I think that we were really on the cusp of, now looking back on it, was really good, although when I was doing it at the time it sucked, is how they place an equal importance on doing the pen test but also writing the report, because that is extremely valuable. Like, I know a couple of pen testing guys, and doing pen testing and hacking is a fraction of the work. A lot of it's writing and writing reports about how you did stuff, which they did have an importance of in that unit. Unfortunately, we kind of got away with writing titles and you got the marks for them. But yeah, that is extremely valuable. And yeah, communicating the information in something like a pen test or vulnerability scan is just as valuable as finding the
issue in the first
sometime.
Yeah.
Because if you find the issue, but nobody wants to, give the resources to make a control for it, you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. Something else is, I think, governance wasn't really covered much now.
Yeah,
Of course.
I thankfully started working at my current company when we were doing the big governance unit. So that helped me learn alongside that, and it had made me grow an appreciation for that unit in general. But I'm not sure how different it would be if I wasn't working in my company at the time.
Oh, big one I just remembered as well is cloud. Yeah, we didn't really learn cloud at all.
Yeah, I think that comes back to the problem of it was so far behind.
Yeah, that's true.
Now that you say that is a massive thing, as cloud was just vacant almost.
Yeah, we didn't do any kind of cloud stuff that was required in our side. We did with networking units. So networking units, we didn't do anything cloud related, and that's such a big part of my work where I'm at now. So I've just had to pretty much learn it on the spot and try and figure out, okay, well, how does this cloud system interact with another cloud system? And I've gotten a certification in it now, so I've got a fairly good understanding. But I think that, that entire security cloud area was totally missed out at uni, and that was a big difference from being in the industry.
Yeah. Last thing before we move on. One thing that was really missing is that I realized is that it comes back to we're learning stuff that's important, but most people aren't going to use. I feel like there was some things that were really baseline that we just missed out on. Like, why wasn't there a unit where we learned just really simple operating systems? There may be one, but it wasn't required. Why didn't we learn all about the Windows operating system? Realistically, that's going to be a lot of people's roles when they get into cyber.
Yep.
And there was just kind of none of that. Like, even now, there'll be some Windows things where I just go, oh shit, how did I not know that?
Exactly. And vulnerabilities as well that come out in Windows.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out those, that's not something that's taught either.
No. I may be wrong, but I think there may be a unit for that at our university, but it wasn't required and it wasn't advertised at all.
No.
Okay, so in the news, there's been a malware/gang come up called Octo Tempest. And why it's been in the news is just because they've been basically crossing the border using threats in their social engineering. So they'll try to initially get whatever they want from you. And then if they don't get it, they'll say stuff like, oh, I'm going to send people to come kick down your door and they're going to kill you or whatever. I think what it really highlights, this is nothing really new. People have done this for centuries probably.
Extortion of some kind, right?
Sometimes just you have to think that bad actors don't really have a moral compass sometimes. Sometimes they might. Sometimes they just don't. And it's trying to engage with them and trying to play their game is never going to work for you.
Yeah. And just kind of on that, we went to a conference last year or earlier this year, and there was a talk on whether or not you should communicate to threat actors. Say if you get hit by ransomware, or say they're claiming to have created a breach in your system. And the point of view of the presenter was that generally you should reach out to the threat actors and kind of tug on the human factor a little bit. Although this attack, the Octo Tempest, it kind of plays the devil's advocate in that kind of discussion, because, what if they don't have any humanity? They may ask you for money and say, okay, we're not going to release the data. They'll take your money and then release the data anyway and sell it to get even more money. Yeah,
I think with that presenter, they may have communicated in a weird way, because I don't think they wanted to say that you should reach out to them, but I think they were saying, like, if you are going to try and tug on that human factor. But my general advice is just don't do it. Especially with something like ransomware, if you try and reach out to them, they're going to target you immediately. They will flip on you. They now know how to contact you. They're just going to extort everything from you. I'd say generally the best approach if somebody does contact you is don't engage them. If you have cyber insurance, which hopefully you do, immediately contact your cyber insurer. They will have people that can contact them, and they are experts in doing so.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I had a chat with a CISO the other sort of month, and they gave me a bit of an overview that you need to let your insurer know first up straight away and see if what you're covered for, what kind of things that they recommend that you do right away. Then you may have to contact the AFP as the sort of governing body there or authority there. Then moving on, if you're a bigger company, then you may have to even chat to a regulator. This is all happening before you even want to start negotiations, if that you want to go down that path with the threat actor. There are ways to talk to threat actors. So for negotiation, the Caesar I chatted to said that there are firms that specialize in negotiations with criminal actors, and you can get a representative from there to give you some advice in that regard. Although he didn't really recommend it, and I wouldn't really recommend it either.
So it might be a topic for another episode, but something very interesting going back to that is there are ransomware gangs that can be classified as good actors, and typically a lot of these firms, like they'll have this sort of relationship with them. They know that if they pay them, they're going to be reliable. Whether you go down that route, I shall not say. But it is a thing, and it's interesting how some ransomware gangs, they're running a business really, and these firms know that they're running a business. Hey, we'll pay you, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's a whole rabbit hole you can go down, but it's interesting. So you mentioned before that you have certifications. You said it was a cloud certification for Microsoft?
Yep.
Yeah, I was wondering, what certifications would you recommend, and what certifications do you plan on getting yourself in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that there are a couple of really good certifications in cybersecurity, but I think there are also a bunch of really terrible ones. So I did one. This one might have a bit of discussion. I was doing a practice quiz for the CC a couple of days ago, and one of the questions was from the provider. One of the practice questions was, can you avoid risk? And it was like, yes, no, never, no, sometimes, or like, yes, sometimes. And I was thinking, okay, well, if I'm thinking from a kind of risk threat mindset, no, like you can always do things to minimize your risk and minimize it to such an extent, but there's always going to be somewhat of a magnitude of risk no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's too open-ended of a question.
It's like a scale, right?
Yeah.
And so I hit no, you can't avoid risk, and the answer was just yes.
Yeah.
So those kind of answers make me think that certs such as the CC may really not be worth that much. Someone sees that you have the CC. Like if I see someone now who has the CC cert, I'm going to think, okay, great. You know that you can sometimes, you can avoid risk completely, which isn't true.
Yeah.
So that kind of just, I guess, sort of
disheartened. Do you get that cert?
Exactly. On the other hand, yeah, so I have a cert in Azure. I've got the AZ500. So that is the Azure Security Engineer Associate cert. So I found that one was really quite challenging. You had to do labs for it. You had to create some resources in the cloud. Certs from Microsoft, I find, while taking them sometimes is a bit hard and annoying, they are quite worth a lot.
Mm.
Same with the, I guess, SISM is that's a good one, and as well as the CBUS, and I suppose the CISSP. I've had some gripes in the past with it, but I think if you're talking about certs that you want to get or I want to get in the future, I guess the top three for me is going to be SISM, then probably the SC100, which is the Security Azure Certification Expert, and then as well maybe the CISSP or the CBUS. Those are the sort of the ones that I'd be looking at in the future.
Yeah. It's quite interesting how in like certs you really want those, a big part of it is just the name recognition. So someone can look at that and go, okay, this person knows their shit.
Yeah.
And that may work. That I'd say that's usually a good call, because if it's got name recognition, it's probably going to have some good content in it. Maybe it's not all perfect, but it's going to have good content in it. One thing that's interesting is that there's probably a lot of certs out there that are really good, but nobody knows them.
Mm.
So what's the point in getting it? If you may have learned a lot of knowledge, but if you can't demonstrate that to someone by saying, hey, I have this, is it worth it? And it's a sad reality of some certifications.
And there are so many in cybersecurity, it's unreal.
As you said, there's probably a lot of shit ones out there. Like, I currently don't have any certs apart from, I don't know if you count a bachelor's as a cert. I would love to get certs someday, especially in like AI governance. I'm really interested in right now, and AI in general. I haven't really looked into it a lot, but I'm sure there is a ton of really shitty AI certifications out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think another thing, to kind of touch on what you said before, there's also the case where people can get a lot of certs, but they actually don't know anything. A good sort of quote from my manager if he's looking for new people in a position is some people can have all the certifications and have all these things backing them up. But when you have to really ask them questions because sometimes they'll have these amazing certs, but they actually don't know shit.
Yeah,
as well.
That's a problem we saw in university a lot, is that being good at doing tests and being good in a practical working environment is two very different things.
Yeah, exactly. And we've mentioned this before on the getting into cybersecurity episode, but you can be perfectly academic and really amazing at doing tests and being technical and all that, but it still comes down to, can you actually learn to apply that knowledge professionally, and can you also talk to people and really display that you know what you're talking about, rather than just try and back it up with some meaningless,
jargon.
Exactly.
Being able to work in a team like that as well. Like, nobody wants to work with somebody who's always in their face telling them about how they're brilliant.
Yeah.
You got to be able to communicate effectively and, really get your knowledge across the board.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really important. Thanks for listening. Just a reminder that the Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Have a cybersecurity question? Send an email to cyberminutespodcast@gmail.com, as we'd love to answer it. Stay cyber safe.